Hello friends and potential friends. Well, Thanksgiving has passed and I've been eating leftovers for the last few days. All the turkey and stuffing and gravy and beans and collards and corn and pumpkin bread and all the good stuff. Problem is now I've got a hankering for turkey sandwiches, and while I've been eating all the other leftovers, I've made a special point of keeping all the breast meat set aside because that seems to work best on sandwiches. Problem is I don't have any bread in the house. So I'm going to attempt, once again, I've done this before, to make a recipe that I got from Krista at the Big Family Homestead for her Amish Sweet Bread. Now I'm going to be cutting this in half. Her original recipe makes 4 loaves, and I really don't need 4 loaves of bread, so I'm going to work on 2 loaves. Let me read through the instructions real quick so you don't have to watch the rest of the video if you don't want to. For 2 loaves of bread, you need 2 cups of warm water, 2/3 cups of sugar, 1.5 tablespoons of yeast, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 cup of oil, and 5 or 6 cups of bread flour. Now, well, I say bread flour, you can use any flour. I've actually only got 5 cups of bread flour, so if I need any more, I'm going to use all-purpose flour. And the way you make it, you mix the sugar in a warm water, stir it slightly so that it can dissolve, sprinkle in the yeast, and stir it lightly. Let this mix stand for the yeast to work till it becomes frothy. I believe the professionals call that proofing. I guess you're trying to prove that the yeast is still alive. Once it gets nice and frothy, you add the oil and stir that in. You add about half of the flour, add in the salt, and mix it well. Then you gradually add flour until you get a nice doughy consistency. It's not real sticky. Spread out some flour on the counter, which is always my favorite part. You know how I like making a mess. And dump the dough out onto the counter. Sprinkle with flour and knead it for about 5 or 6 minutes. You want it to be spongy, but so that it rebounds when you poke at it. When you reach that point, you put it in a bowl and cover it with a damp towel and let it rise for an hour. Then you flour the counter again, dump the dough out onto the counter, divide it into, in my case, 2 equal parts for 2 loaves. Shape the dough into loaves and put it in bread pans and let it rise in the pans for another 45 minutes with that same damp towel over top of it. Then you bake it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. Remove it from the pan and move it onto your cooling rack and let it cool. So let's get going. I've got the 5 cups of flour. Now I'm switching this up a little bit. Instead of using sugar, I'm using my all-purpose honey. So this is the first time I've used honey, so we'll see how that works out. I've got my yeast, salt, a little bit of oil, and over here I've got another jar of all-purpose flour for making the messes. Now let's get some warm water. 2 cups of warm water. You want it warm, not hot. You don't want to kill the yeast, you just want to make it comfortable. And then, and I messed up by the way, recipe called for 2/3 cup of sugar, and I measured out 2/3 cup of honey. Really, from what I've heard, you only want to use about half the amount of honey as you do sugar in this kind of recipe. So there's 1/3 cup of honey. Put that into the warm water. Mix it around good to let it dissolve. And also to get the rest of the honey out of the measuring cup. That looks pretty good. Throw that in the sink. I'll deal with that later. Now I need 1.5 tablespoons of yeast. There's 1. And there's about a half. Toss that in there, and we will stir that up a little bit, just lightly. You just want to wake up the yeast. Don't want it all up on the sides of the bowl. And let that sit for a little bit. Watch it to become frothy. I'm not going to make you sit there and watch it, but I'm going to. So I'll bring you back when it becomes frothy. Okay, the yeast has been sitting for about 5 minutes. And as I hope you can see, it's getting pretty frothy, which tells me that my yeast is still good. So next step in the process, I need to add the oil, stir that in. Needless to say, oil and water don't mix real well. Then I'm going to add in about half of the flour. That's about half. Add in the salt. And then I need to reposition the camera, put this over on the KitchenAid, and mix it thoroughly. Repositioned, and then we mix. Okay, add a little bit more flour. And mix some more. Add in some more flour. And keep on mixing. And you probably can't see it, but that is starting to look like dough. Starting to pull away from the sides of the bowl a little bit. Go ahead and add some more of that flour, because it's still pretty tacky. Okay, that's the 5 cups. And that's starting to come together pretty good, but I'm going to add a little bit more flour. There's about another half cup. Because it's still just a little bit too moist. Whatever the right word is for that. Maybe a little more flour. And incidentally, the amount of flour that you wind up adding is pretty much depends on how much humidity you have in your area. And I have a lot of humidity, so I tend to add a little bit more flour than a lot of people would have to. Let that mix up good, get everything mixed together. Wait to see it pulling away from the sides of the bowl. I might have to add a little bit more flour to that. Let's see if I can make a mess. Looks like I might need a little bit more flour. That makes a total of 6 cups of flour that I've added. Like I said, depending on your humidity, you may get away with a little bit less. And we'll be adding a little bit more flour to it while we're kneading, so should come out pretty good here. Okay, seems to be pretty well mixed now. Nice doughy consistency. Come on. There we go. Okay, now I need to reposition the camera again to get ready for my favorite part of the process. And my favorite part of the process is making a mess on purpose. Flour down the counter good. And scrape this all apart. And dump it on the counter. I don't know how much of this you can see because I'm probably blocking the camera. And who knows, that might be a good thing. But there's the dough. And I need to sprinkle some more flour on top of it so it doesn't all stick it to my fingers. And then I need to knead it. That is still a little bit sticky, so we'll get some more of that flour worked into it. Knead it for about 5 to 6 minutes and add more flour if needed, if necessary. I guess I can't keep using the word needed in multiple meanings while I'm doing this, but I just keep turning it over and pressing it in and turning it over some more and picking up more of that flour off the counter. And it's starting to look pretty good, but I'm going to keep on going for a couple more minutes. because, hey, this is fun. Don't want it to be sticky. Need to get to the point where it does not stick to my fingers. Or the counter. Oh, and incidentally, yes, I do wash my hands several times during this whole process. So, but I'm the only one that'll be eating it anyway. Doesn't make that much difference. More flour on the counter. Okay, it's getting harder to get the folded parts to stick back together. So I think we're about there. It feels pretty good too. So we'll just take this gob of dough, make sure it isn't sticking to the counter anymore. I have a hard time stopping this part because it is so much fun. Kind of like when I was a kid playing with Play-Doh. But we're going to take this ball of dough and drop it into my favorite popcorn bowl. Find us a clean towel. Get it a bit wet. Just want it to be damp. Not really terribly wet. Set it over top of the bowl like so. And then we're going to let that rise for about an hour. Okay, the dough has been rising for about an hour. Let's see what it did. Yep, that looks good. Basically doubled in size. Now the fun part, I get to make another mess. Because I gotta flour the counter again and dump this out onto the counter. Now I don't want to knead it really anymore. I just need to split it in half. But I'm going to go ahead and get plenty of flour on there so it doesn't stick to my hands or to my knife or any of that stuff. And I don't have one of them fancy dough cutters that I see a lot of people have, but I bet this will work. Split it in half and then form each half into a loaf. And drop it into my bread pans. Same thing for the other half. Form it into a loaf. Drop it into the pan. And then I'm going to bring these pans right over here. Cover them with the moist towel again. And now they have to sit and rise for another 45 minutes. So I'll bring you back when that's done. Now I got to clean up my mess again. Okay, the loaves have been rising for about 45 minutes. And I can tell already that they're getting pretty well formed. There's the reveal. The oven has been preheated to 350 degrees. And they're going into the oven for 30 minutes. Though to be honest, I'll be checking them at 25. Timer just went off. And it looks like these things are ready to come out of the oven. Nice. Little bit of flour on top, that's not a big deal. Now I need to get them out of here and onto the cooling rack. That's a one. And that's a two. Now comes the hardest part of the whole process. I gotta wait and let them cool a little bit. Don't need the oven anymore. That looks pretty good. So I'll bring you back in a few. Well, I've waited about as long as I can wait. Hopefully it's cool enough. How's that? Is that what they call crumb? I'm not sure. I'm not a professional. One there. And one there. A little bit of mayo. I'll try to hide the brand so I don't get involved in the mayo fights. And you may think I'm a little bit crazy, but I also like a little bit of mustard. And the main ingredient, and oh, wait a minute, I need something off the front porch. I'll be right back. There. Too bad I don't have any tomatoes ripe yet. But there we have one turkey sandwich. I've been waiting all year for that. Now, I made this video at the request of someone very special to me. Mom, I hope you enjoyed it. I wish I could be out there with you and share it with you. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time.